Hey guys, it's Trafotin, your favorite armchair developer whose only IDE is NeoVim. Let me give you a proposal of what I think we can do to improve open source work culture. And I think it can all start with changing the way that we communicate. Of course, communication is something that with FOSS developers and probably with a lot of people that are more technically savvy, they've sacrificed a few skill points in that speech skill, if I might say so myself. I think there's steps that both developers can take, but also some things that users can do, and it's stuff that we can all probably start doing immediately. One thing that I think we as users can start doing is start recognizing developers. Now, obviously, when we talk about recognition can be, oh, you thank someone for creating an application. And usually people are very good about that, especially in the open source community. If people are willing to file bug reports about something random, of course, they will probably thank people for making their application. It's something that's really easy to do. But I think what's more important is really getting to know people who make the applications that you use. And I mean, like, you know them, like, by their names and the other work that they do. And this is honestly something that doesn't require a lot of effort, and you might learn a bit more about the project or the programs that you use on a more organizational or political basis. I think that something that gets overlooked way too often, especially, is names. And it's really easy to say XYZ project developer or developers rather than the names of the people who have worked hard to create or contribute to projects. And it's a reminder that the blog posts you read, the issues in your Git or Mercurial server are all brought up and written by people. Real people with day jobs who are probably committing volunteer time and don't get paid squat to do anything that they do for you. Now, one of my pet peeves is when people talk about GNOME's developers. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of things GNOME could do to improve, especially around their development culture. But the net of people who work under GNOME's umbrella is far too wide, because there's a lot of people who do things within GNOME that have crossover into other projects that you might know. When we refer to GNOME's developers, are we talking about someone like Georgios Stavrakis, who's been a big contributor to OBS or GNOME Calendar? What about someone like Florian Mühlner, who's been a major contributor to GNOME's extension framework or the display manager Mutter? Of course, this is to go without saying, it's healthy and fine to criticize a project, but it's time to stop referring to the work done by people or the blog posts written by people as XYZ developers. Because with names, you're going to learn real fast that the majority of projects are actually run by a minority of people who are actually engaging with the project online. Now, of course, you can go to a contributor list of any project that you know and love, and this is a reminder that when you read that contributor list, it's often a historical contributor list, and it's not actually people who are actively contributing to a project. And this is the warning that I have, is if you're going to criticize a decision, please discuss it about the people with whom said decision concerns, rather than trying to blanket include every single developer on it. Now, I understand this could be taken as me ragging on users, but don't worry, it's developers' turn now. Communication with users and developers is important, but oftentimes it feels like when you read a lot of developer blogs, it's really more focused about developers and other creators rather than actual users. So let's return to GNOME again, and this is where I think GNOME falls short. GNOME runs a blog called This Week in GNOME. It's a great way to catch up on the work done by various developers within GNOME's community. The problem is, none of the stuff that's written on there is change that users would actually be interested in knowing. And this is what I mean by this is something that is probably more targeted towards developers rather than actual users. Because you have to consider who the target audience of this blog actually is. Is it for these developers to show off their work? If so, who's actually reading it? Visiting the About page of This Week in GNOME redirects you to a GitLab README, which is just a bunch of submission rules, and then the illusion of this being for people's kind of starts to fall apart. Now, I appreciate the content of This Week in GNOME, but I think there needs to be a clear means, and it needs to be something a little more official and forward-facing for people to access. Now let's talk about KDE's developers. As much as I like reading Nate Graham's blog about KDE's development, or watch Nicolo's videos, or read his Twitter, it's frankly really strange that KDE's developers don't contribute promotional content related to their work. And it's honestly really strange, because you think KDE would put this sort of thing more front and center, even though they have a YouTube channel and a blog where people could publish said content.
You kind of stole my question. I wanted to ask that one, but fine. No problem. Yeah, so... and
users don't even get presented to it as if there's a, maybe a pop-up during, like, the big updates, just like when Apple forces you to accept the new terms of service when you update to the next version of macOS. And this is what I mean by it's really important, and something that needs to be more tangible to understand is that developers and users can't just live in a bubble. If This Week in GNOME is supposed to be about developer-focused announcements, and prominent KDE developers are out creating their own user-focused stories, this leads to the chicken and egg scenario of there needs to be a way for creators to contribute to a project, but also for the project to advertise this thing themselves. And there needs to be an explanation of how changes made by these people positively impacts the user experience. And it shouldn't be surprising that the users of a free and open source operating system overpower its developers. Users far outweigh the number of developers, and there's not enough people contributing right now, and it's a tough job. But even though it's a tough job, I think it could make a great story. It just needs to be these organizations telling the stories, not just the people who are developing for it, and not just people who are just creating online as anime characters. The point is, putting this content needs to be put in front of new users too, not just insiders. You can say, well, we have developers that, I don't know, we made the corners of our windows more round. Explain why making the corners more round is better for people. Because you can say that you did something, but that's just an empty story, and we can't tell empty stories. There needs to be a call to action which draws new people in to further enhance work in the project. Because a story can be used to get more coding work and people involved, but it also needs to be a way in for the people who don't know how or have never worked in something like it professionally. Here's the thing, it's also a great moment to make developer talks higher quality and more forward-facing for people to access. Every year, we've got great conferences at places like FOSS and where all systems go, where people can learn more about what's happening in the open source world. Let's organize some of the developers of a major project to all get together to do a Jitsi call. We don't do Zoom around here. They're frauds who've lied about their encryption. Everyone's gonna sit down, and all you gotta do is live stream every other week, maybe even every week if you're feeling adventurous. It doesn't even need to be that long. It can only be like 20 minutes. All you have to do is just sit down and chat about the cool new things that are happening in your project, and maybe even answer some questions in a live chat. You can be open about it, tell jokes, it's probably gonna be a great time. The problem is, in today's world, you can't just be a dev. You also need to be cognizant of your social media presence and speak with some illusion of the sense of authority, like I'm doing right now. It gets attention, but more importantly, exposes to you what people think and can draw people into your project by directly engaging with them. And I think all of this would help solve the chicken and egg problem of how we fund developers and foundations, or even just ask for help. You now have work that people know people for, or even people on a name basis, and you have a way to engage with said people. And you've achieved the peak goal of any content creator, begging for money and sponsorships. I mean, that's important too, but Really, it's more about attention. At any moment, open source projects need to start getting more attention from people, and then you can start pegging people for money. Of course, you can't make it too annoying, but you should try to guilt trip people a little bit. You say like, wow, look at all this work we're doing for free. Don't think of it like microtransactions in a mobile game. Think of it more like the banner that appears on the top of Wikipedia. Because here's the real rub. Developing software for free, distributing it to people for free, and reproducing it for free is not exactly sustainable if people aren't being adequately funded for their work. There's a reason open source is deprived of talent and has no financial model. And a way we can change it is how developers advertise their products to the public, and changing the public mentality, which will in turn generate developmental and financial contribution. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, users, you need to be a little nicer to your developers and try to learn the developers who make the things that you do on a more regular basis. And if you're a developer, you need to start acting like a content creator and start pushing out the news in a more digestible way of what you're actually doing and why people will benefit from it. And once developers start acting like YouTubers, then they can start begging people for money. Beg people for money and remind people every day about the work that you, maybe not every day, about the work that you do. And I'm sure users will understand, because the least you could do is ask. Speaking of which, I'm going to ask you to leave a like on this video. Leave a like on this video and comment down below the projects that you like to know and the developers that you know on a name basis and appreciate the work that you do. Go and send them your love. And if you're interested in more about the work that I do, you can go visit my website, Trafotin.com. And you can also get a full transcript of everything that I'm saying right now. And you also get some pictures, bonus content, and you can learn a little bit more about me and the work that I do, so you can give me money on my Patreon, YouTube memberships, and cryptocurrency. Alright, thank you for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time. I promise I won't be late on a video because a gas leak happened in my house.